welcome to On Air with B&B.
I'm Brittany.
And I'm Bethany, and we're two mental health therapists with real talk and mental health issues that matter. Today, we're going to be talking about IEPs and 504 plans. I'm not quite sure if that's what they're called in other states, but that is what they're called in the state of Florida. And we're going to be talking about the differences between the two, what to expect, like with the process of getting it started, what questions to ask, what it looks like once they're in place. Because we've been talking and we have a lot of clients that, you know, at some point their kiddos might need an IEP or a 504, and they really have no idea where to get started, how to, you know, what questions to ask. They don't even know in the state of Florida that you're allowed to bring whoever you want to these meetings. Actually, I think it's a law now. They have to get something signed saying they did not prohibit you as the parent from bringing anyone. So we always tell our clients when suggesting that they get one, or if they have one already and are a new client of ours, like the next time you go for your annual review, feel free to let us know ahead of time so that we can come. Because again, it's always good to have a professional there that knows exactly what to ask, make sure that they're implementing it properly. Because it's not that schools don't want to implement them or don't want to implement them properly. It's just that there's a ton of kiddos that need them or have them, and there's only so many people who can implement them and enforce them. And sometimes it's just a lot, you know, even for the providers like the schools that are implementing these plans. So to get started, do we want to start first with like what is each, like an IEP versus a 504?
Yeah, we can do that.
Because realistically, and we'll get more in depth, but there's like one key difference between an IEP and a 504. Both plans offer accommodations for children who have different diagnoses. So ADHD is a popular one, anxiety, ASD, ODD, dyslexia, dysgraphia. There's all kinds of different reasons that your kiddo would need this in school. But depending on their diagnosis, they would need certain accommodations, and both plans offer accommodations. The one difference that an IEP has versus the 504 is that an IEP also offers specialized learning instruction. So for example, if your kiddo, I have a client who has dyslexia. So he has an IEP because he needs accommodations. So he needs a quiet room, more test taking time. But he also needs an instructor to read him the dialogue when he's doing reading comprehension, because it's, you know, it takes twice as long for him to read it, and then it's really a comprehension test. So when he has the specialized instructions and somebody reading it to him, then really he's still doing what, say, a kiddo without dyslexia is doing, which is comprehending what he just heard or read, but he gets that specialized instruction because it would take him twice as long to read it and then comprehend it, if that makes sense to everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. The IEP stands for Individualized Educational Plan. And I think that's important to say just because it does focus more on specialized learning and how they are receiving the same academic curriculum as
And
their other
instruction,
peers.
yeah.
Yes. The 504 accommodations plan just provides accommodations nonetheless, but it doesn't really change the learning style.
Exactly.
It does alter different ways that they can navigate certain behaviors. For example, I have a client who has GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, or I have another client who has ADHD, right? I have another client who has ODD, and they all have a 504 accommodations plan across the board. Now, I will preface every single plan, whether it's the IEP or the 504 accommodations plan, they're both fluid documents, so the documents do change as the child changes as well. There's also mandatory, evaluations and that have to be conducted every year annually to see like where the child is at, and maybe some of their like accommodations at that time are not needed. I do want to really underscore that both of these plans are here in place to support the child, not to enable
Yeah,
the
not as a
child.
crutch. We
Right.
don't want them to feel like they have to have it, but but to use it as a support.
Correct. Absolutely. With the end goal in mind, especially with individuals and children who have a 504 accommodations plan to promote growth across the board as well. I do have, one kiddo, she's in middle school and she has anxiety as well. And she really does struggle with like public speaking, right? So her first accommodation was just to have a fidget toy to kind of keep her hands busy. And she was also allowed to wear fidget rings. Full disclosure, this particular school establishment that I'm referring to does not allow fidgets on campus
Mm-hmm.
without documentation or an accommodations plan in place, whether that be the IEP or the 504 accommodations plan. So, circling back to this particular middle school female client who has anxiety, she does struggle with that. So, in the meeting, I was present and I was able to advocate and also educate on what anxiety really does look like. A lot of individuals who aren't mental health counselors or are not in the mental health profession or psychology profession have a misunderstanding of what anxiety looks like. Or maybe they have a personal experience, whether they're interpersonal or with family and close friends, of what anxiety looks like, but not recognizing that anxiety shows up differently for different people, and not to mention there's different severity levels as well. So for my particular client, she's in middle school and she started off with a fidget, and her accommodation was she was able to sit next to her teacher and like give the speech with just the teacher present without being forced to make eye contact. Then we encouraged her to stand and face the teacher with eye contact and then still have the fidget. And then that translated, this is exposure therapy. And then that
I was just
translated,
thinking that, but I didn't want to cut you off.
yeah. And then that translated or transitioned, forgive me, into, speaking in front of a couple of friends, right? Like at a group, maybe during like a break or something like that. And so kids would volunteer, or she would have like her friends and she would practice and do that. And then eventually, I mean, we're at the point now, like she's able to like, yay, have the opportunity to converse in front of
Give
her
an oral
class.
presentation without having a panic attack beforehand,
Literally.
basically.
Yes, absolutely. So we do see that as
Yeah,
well.
I mean, there's so many different accommodations. Again, it's individualized.
Mhm.
So that's what one of the meetings. So I want to kind of talk about the process of getting
Sure.
started, just because again, it can be a lengthy process. There are steps and stages to them. The first one being that your child needs a formal diagnosis.
Mhm.
It can come from a therapist, from a licensed therapist. It can come from a doctor, a psychiatrist, which is also a doctor, but for mental health, a psychologist, but they need a formal diagnosis from a mental health professional or a medical professional. And then once they have that, and it doesn't need to be any lengthy document. It can just be my child has like written on something ADHD, Dr. So and so, or licensed mental health therapist, so and so. And then you can either email that, fax it, however you want to do it, bring it in yourself into the child's school. I would recommend to the guidance counselor, the school guidance counselor. They're typically in charge of setting these types of
Like meetings.
meetings and assessments up. That's pretty much one of their like main goals, is supporting the kid and getting the right supports put in place. Once you bring it to the attention of the school, my child has this formal diagnosis, we'd really like to get them assessed for a 504 or an IEP, depending on which area it falls into. Then they set up it's called an eligibility determination meeting,
Mhm.
where the parents come, the therapist is allowed to come. Again, this is that meeting that I said they can't prohibit you from bringing, you as the parent, bringing anybody into the meeting. You could bring 10 people in there if you wanted. Now, why would you do that? I have no idea, but hey, if your team is 10 people deep, so be it.
Yeah.
But they, during this meeting is where they talk about, the diagnosis and what kind of challenges that the child may or may not have in a school setting due to their particular diagnosis, whether it be anxiety or ADHD or ASD or a learning disorder or all of the above.
Right.
And then based off of that conversation, they determine by the end of that meeting, usually there's a school psychologist there,
The
the school
school counselor or guidance
counselor,
counselor.
um,
Usually the principal or the vice principal is
a
a
teacher may or may not be there.
Yeah.
And then sometimes additional
I've had
resources.
I've had like BCBAs,
Yes.
like the school BCBA or the school's behavioral team. They call
Mm-hmm.
or behavioral specialists. They give them different
Yeah, it
names.
depends what school, what county, all of
Yes.
those things.
Yes.
But generally, this is the group of people that are there, the child's caregiver, parents, and again, whoever they decided to bring to the meeting, if anyone. And by the end of that meeting, they will say, we deem this child eligible or non-eligible to start this process.
Mm-hmm.
If they deem them eligible, and typically if a child has a formal diagnosis, they are eligible to get this process started.
We'll get there.
Right.
I have a lot to say about
That's
that
been
one.
my
Yeah.
experience. And then they say, okay, we deem them eligible. So now we're going to basically observe the child over the next, 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to have our school psychologist or our behavior specialist or whoever may be actually sit down with the child individually and do some assessments to see basically like where they're lacking so that we can then come up with a plan to determine their accommodations or their needs that will make them more successful in this academic setting. So I'll let you take it from here since you have had some different experiences than I have.
Yeah. So majority, I would say at least like 80% of my client population has some level of accommodations. And so I've been to like a lot of these meetings, and it's really interesting because I have this one particular client, and we're still getting like some pushback to this day. And he has generalized anxiety disorder, but it's very severe. I mean, transitioning into the school sometimes can be really hard after a long weekend, especially after a break. There has been a history of crisis situations where he would engage in like, very big episodes, for lack of better terms, whether that be, panic attacks encompassing with just a huge level of dysregulation across the board. And yes, this is happening technically outside of school. However, school in itself is a big trigger, like transitioning into school. And then
it's hard to get him there.
Right. And then while he's even in school, he's having psychosymptomatic symptoms, consistently asking and requesting to go to the nurse or to, I just don't feel good. I have stomach aches and things of that nature. Again, that's a lot of his anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
To fully like have an understanding, I did encourage mom to go rule out all things medically. So we've already kind of crossed that bridge. And I've even had many consultations with his not only pediatrician but also his psychiatrist as well, and a lot of these symptoms are very much consistent with his anxiety like disorder, and it's happening in school. One thing about this child though, he's good to a certain level of degree of masking. He's very pleasant, and then academically he's not having any like struggles, so to speak.
Well,
Right?
it appears that way.
Right.
Because he has good grades.
Correct. And so just because he has good grades, that's their narrative. However, we do have like a history of like him calling the nurse and like having like crisis moments in school where the teacher's like, I don't even know what to do. And then they're coming to me for advice. And my advice is, let's give him a 504 accommodations plan. And it's like they want all the other advice rather than just that. Well, we'll implement the accommodations. And my problem with this as an advocate, because that's one of our roles as therapists, is advocacy. My problem with this, transparently speaking, and the reason I have to be a pit bull in these types of environments is because, what I'm hearing is you just want the solutions without a formal document. this formal document, just so that everyone knows, does protect your child.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps them safe, and also not only gives them accommodations to be successful, but it gives the school the resources so they know how to navigate and manage all of these said behaviors. It is fully understandable that teachers are not mental health professionals. That's not their role in the child's life. They're there to teach and educate. And so the student, their student, is having a crisis moment or having psychosymptomatic symptoms, they can then refer to the document, in this case, a 504 accommodations plan, because again, this child is academically successful and in a gifted program and things of that nature. He's very bright. And so it's just showing up in different ways. Even like at recess or on the playground, there's sometimes like a lot of isolations, because a lot of isolation or avoidant like behaviors because of his behaviors. I will disclose this child also goes to public school. The reason I disclose that is because at public schools and charter schools, they do have to have, because charter schools follow the
Public school
yeah,
district.
the district's rules and things of that nature. It's just their funding is different, and that's the logistical difference. But public schools and charter schools do have to, you know, entertain, for lack of better words, IEPs and 504 accommodations plan. Now, private schools do not.
Correct. It's up to them. It's their choice.
Right. And so I just say that to say, it is important to like navigate if your child does go to a private school and they're not making appropriate accommodations to allow him or her to be successful. I've had this conversation as a clinician. I know you have as
Mm-hmm.
well. It's just,
Is this the right place for your kiddo?
Yeah, absolutely. But circling back to my friend here, we're still struggling. The school at this current point in time has now created a safety plan. The thing that, I get it, the safety plan is fantastic. However, when you look at it pragmatically, the safety plan's end goal is to do what? It's more of like a coping strategy, essentially. When the child is in crisis, here's a safety plan to help him regulate. My goal as his clinician, also as his advocate, I don't want my friend
You want to
to
be
go.
proactive.
Correct. I'm not here to give you to allow him to struggle and then, okay, these are the things to like help. No, I want preventative strategies. In a sense, that's what accommodations are for, when done appropriately and effectively and efficiently, right? And so I'm here to promote for preventative care, not the safety plan of like when shit hits the fan.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Basically.
Is the safety plan helpful? Absolutely. Because here's the thing, full disclosure, even if, he does get a 504 accommodations
He could
plan,
still have a crisis moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. But historically speaking, when you look at research, when you do have appropriate accommodations in plan, which is why we always encourage for a professional to go to these meetings to advocate, because we as professionals will know which accommodations would be most appropriate to help the child succeed rather than allowing the child to be enabled, right? And so, yes, they created the safety plan. And so I think it's great to have on file so when he does go into crisis moments, but my goal is to prevent it, right? And the accommodations would allow him to kind of mitigate those crisis moments and even those psychosymptomatic symptoms as well. Because here's the funny part, everyone, shockingly enough, and I say this super sarcastically in case anyone didn't know, but it's funny because to this day, yours truly is still getting emails, even with the safety plan in place, for additional accommodations. And what's really, even if I just may speak very frank, it's even more frustrating as a professional, because it's like you're coming to me for professional advice, and then you are selecting what you want to take from it. Mm-hmm. And that's where I get really annoyed. And I want to be very honest about this, because I do know I have some of my students who tune in to watch this. And so the reason I'm highlighting this on this video, I was really excited for this video, Ask Bethany, because, I think sometimes we do forget, unintentionally, of course, like that we are advocates in this profession.
Yeah.
Whether you are a clinician watching this, or an educator, one of my teachers watching this, or even a parent, we're all advocates for either your child, or you as a parent, you are an advocate for your own child, right? And so I say all of this to say that unfortunately this does happen. It doesn't happen often, but there are battles sometimes, and sometimes you are in the trenches, and it feels like that. And this particular child is in fifth grade and is in transition to going to sixth grade, which is middle school here in Florida next year. And then
It's
he has
only going to get harder. It's only going to get,
absolutely,
especially,
he's got like 7 classes in a day.
yeah, different teachers, different expectations, different kids, different environment, hormones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
these are going to be the toughest years for him. What you're trying to do is advocate ahead of time so that he's prepared and has these supports in place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a struggle.
It has been. I do also want to say as well, there are very far and slim and few, but they do exist, IEP and 504 accommodation specialists. Who do, you can meet with them, and you have to, like, have a consultation. Obviously they would
Do they
have to meet their
cost
child.
money?
They do.
Okay.
They do. I wish they were provided for free, but I feel like if they were, then I just feel like a lot of the schools would potentially just drown and not be able to keep up,
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Which I do want to say at the end of the day, I do think when these plans aren't getting implemented, or they're saying that they don't feel like they're eligible, I don't think they're trying to just not help the kids. I think, again, that there are a lot of kids that need these plans and accommodations and specialized instructions, and there's only so many people that can actually deliver them. And so I think sometimes they are drowning a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that anybody that gets into the field of working for a school or working with kids is trying to take them down or not help them. I think that we do need more people in place, that can provide all of these supports.
No, I definitely agree with that to a degree. And I say that because, it is important for the school professionals to even realize too, like, a part of their role is to advocate for their students. Yeah. And so I understand and I do respect pushback. I just don't understand when we have all of the evidence. For those of you who don't know me, I always have evidence. I have a lot of receipts, and I take very specific data and notes and things of that nature. And so I'm coming to these meetings like prepared. Mm-hmm. And I'm coming there to advocate for the child. And I am coming there to work as a full team, because we work better together. And I fully believe that. I just want everyone to know it's not always a walk in the park. And I want you to get that from this video. I don't want you to go and say, oh, so these are the steps that Bethany was talking about. And, she said, like, more often than not. So I'm just going to go in there. I don't need anyone else. And here's the thing, you have an eligibility, and there is a certain time frame. If you have one eligibility, let's just say your child's in fourth grade, right? You will have to wait to get another eligibility meeting even in place, unless something huge or detrimental does happen. And my thing is, again, to circle back to it, I'm very proactive. And just as much as our parents, they don't want that to happen. Mm-hmm. The reason they're even initiating, because here's the thing, not all schools will initiate a plan unless it's impacting their peers. And I hate to say that, but that's where it comes from. The school will reach out to parents to initiate the eligibility meeting, historically speaking, when the child is unfortunately disrupting other students' ability to learn. However, if the child is just academically successful, like my client, but is having moments that's not impacting the rest of the class,
quietly struggling,
yes, that's when the parents typically have to advocate and promote and initiate, hey, I'm requesting this particular meeting. So yes, parents, I do want you to know, you don't have to wait for the school. Parents can request for these
and
if
meetings. You need a change, so yes, like Brittany was saying, you every year you have to do, they call it an IEP 504 review. To see, do we still need these accommodations? Do we need to add new ones? You don't have to wait until that review to change things either. No. You can request a change before that happens.
Yeah,
right.
I always say both documents, IEP 504 accommodations plans, are fluid documents. Yes. Just like I said earlier, they change when the child changes. But yes, it is important to know.
One piece of advice, though, is to get in there, if you're in the spring, to get to request it sooner rather than later, if you're at the initial stages of this process, because it does take anywhere from
6 to 9 weeks.
right. And if we're just like putting in, here's my formal diagnosis, I'd like to get my, set up a meeting to see if my kid's eligible and get this process started, and we're in May, it's probably not going to happen until the following school year, because they do not do these types of assessments at the beginning of the summer.
Right.
They will start them like right before school picks up in the fall again, but they are not doing them in June and July typically.
Right. When school's out of session, the assessments won't be conducted.
Right, because they're not open.
Right. And the meetings won't occur. But no, you at any time, you can request a meeting, whether that's like the initial meeting and you provide the differential diagnosis, or if the child already has a document in place and you want to review to make different changes or addendums to
You
the
can ask for that
document
anytime.
at any time. Yeah. So I think that's important. I do want to circle back to like the private school because they don't have to have accommodations. Some of them do entertain the idea. And also, some private schools do cater for certain behaviors and unique needs as well. And so, I do want to highlight that not all private schools are just the private schools that we think of with the uniforms and the suit and ties and all the things like that. There are some private schools that have specializations of different type of like student populations, and
Like
they
we
cater to
cater
needs.
to neurodivergent populations, or for specific learning disorders
Right.
and things like that, because they have the staff that are certified to accommodate
Right.
those needs.
Right. Absolutely.
And then there are private schools that don't have any staff to accommodate those needs. And that's why they're not willing to entertain the accommodations, because, again, not because they don't want to, but they don't have the capacity to.
Yeah.
So you really have to do your research on each school and what your child's needs are, and if they even have the resources to accommodate them.
Absolutely. And then just asking yourself, like, is this the best fit for my child?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And it might be for one of your kids and not your other. And then that's a whole nother thing, because, you can only be in
one place
so
at
many
one time.
places. So, it might not be, you might not have the luxury to have your kids at different schools.
Yeah. So let's talk about like, if these parents are like in the meeting, right, and they initiated the meeting. Because here's the thing, I've never been in a meeting. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I have never been in a meeting for an IEP or a 504 accommodations plan where it was initiated by the school and the student did not get the plan. Typically, when it's initiated by the school, the plan is in place. They just really want consent from the parents at that point, to be transparent with you guys. Now, if it's initiated by the parent, it's really 50-50 at that point, right? Because the school is going to have to do their due diligence. Now, when the school comes to the parents, they typically come to the parents with data already. Hey, we were observing your child and this is what we see, and this is why we think an IEP and or a 504 accommodations plan would be appropriate for your child. But just bearing in mind, when you as the parent are initiating the process or initiating the meeting, at least it's a lot more time consuming because of what Bethany was saying.
Yeah.
Like they have to do their own, like the school psychologist, whether it's for that particular school or whoever belongs to the district, they do have to go in and observe the child and take data and things of that nature. So it could be a lengthy process.
And some of these schools have one school psychologist for 3 or 4 different schools.
Yeah.
So, the school psychologist might be at your child's school, but only on Tuesdays and Thursdays for a few hours. Not every school has their own behavior specialist, their own school psychologist. Now, they do typically always have their own guidance counselor that kind of sets up this whole process, but not necessarily the professionals to do the assessments or the observations, to take the data, all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you recommend, or what have you recommended, if the parents initiate, the meeting for either the IEP or the 504 accommodations, and then the child does not qualify? Then what? What do you normally say? Because when you're done? I'll go.
So one, I actually have never had that happen. Knock on wood. Like I've
Yeah.
never had that happen. Maybe it's because I'm so scary. I don't know.
No,
I'm
that's
really
not
not,
it.
but I don't know why that hasn't happened, but I'm glad it hasn't.
Yeah.
But what I would recommend is that you be like a squeaky wheel, to be completely honest. Oh, nope, nope, we're not doing that.
This was
This is
her
Parker,
idea.
by the way. I love him. He has to be here.
He's distracting me.
Be the squeaky wheel, because be persistent, they can't turn you away from advocating for your child. So keep asking, keep sending data, this is what's going on. Just the squeaky wheel gets the oil, in my opinion. That's what I would suggest, is just keep advocating for your kid and don't take no for an answer, kind of like you said earlier. I feel like at some point they're going to listen, or at least get annoyed with you enough to entertain what you're asking them to do, because that's got to be easier than, hearing from the parent every single day, whether it be through email or phone calls or you showing up. That's honestly what I would recommend.
Yeah. I do say too, because in this particular case that I was referring to as an example, he is in fifth grade and he's transitioning to a new school next year. So the current
School
game,
board.
yeah,
You could go to the school
I was just
board
going to say that too,
instead
but
of just the school.
yeah. But we are going to wait, and he's transitioning to a whole new school next year. And mom has already reached out to that school to just kind of plant a seed to say, hey, this is what, I know he already has a safety plan in place, because again, it's a fluid document, but it also follows them as well, just so that everyone knows that they can have this until they're 18 and or their senior year, whichever one comes first. And so it's important to know that this is something that they can have for forever.
They can also take it to college, their
Yep.
504 plan.
If they wanted to, they could. Yeah. And so it's,
again, you would have to meet with the school board at this point, not because that's where they would do all of the assessments, eligibility determinations, if it's you're initially starting the process, all of that. And sometimes going through, because I've had a lot of kids who were homeschooled, but they're thinking about possibly sending their kid to public school. So I'm get this ball started now, call the school board, get an IEP in place before they even start. So if you decide you're not, again, being reactive, you're being proactive.
Right. Absolutely. So I think these are all really good tips. I always, with the circling back to what you were saying, is not giving up and things of that nature. I do want to acknowledge and validate that it could be a very frustrating situation, and it could be very, very dismissive as a parent, right? I know I feel like that, and I'm just the professional in the room, right? And so I can't even imagine as a parent how that could feel. And
for your child.
Yeah, so I do want to let you know, if this has ever happened to you, that we see you and we hear you, and it is not easy, and it is really hard, and it is frustrating, and it is okay to feel like that, and those are all very valid feelings and emotions. But one thing I always tell my parents, we can't allow that to discourage us. We could feel it, and that's good. There's no bad feelings or emotions here, but we cannot allow ourselves to be discouraged, to give up, right? And so persevering ourselves. And if you feel like you are a person who are a parent, forgive me, if you are a parent who are potentially in that boat right now, right, where you feel distraught, defeated, disappointed, you feel like the school's against my child because they're not giving my child what he or she needs to succeed and be successful in the school environment, and if you're feeling any of those things, I do want to encourage those parents as well to seek individualized therapy to really work through those things, because it is exhausting sometimes, and it can be defeating and draining. But just also encouraging the parents who are tuning in who potentially experience this to not allow that to prevent you from stop trying, right? Not giving up. So we got to keep trying, we got to keep giving up. And then again, you can always hire or find a specialist, or have your child's therapist come in to advocate.
I also think the more documentation, the better. So if you have, I've had parents, of middle schoolers who are just initiating this process, because in elementary school they didn't need it, but now going into middle school with like more classes, different expectations, all of that, they do. It's just harder to manage. I've had parents like with the formal diagnosis or during the eligibility determination meeting bring in evaluations that their child had when they were 3 years old, from a psychologist, showing that they might have had sensory processing disorder, or that they've had OT or speech. The more documentation, the better, that their kid needs supports in place, will help with that determination. Again, you might be in a situation like Brittany's speaking about with this particular child, where they're still giving the pushback. But again, like, the more documentation, the better to support your case, the evidence that she speaks of.
Yes. And so, and he's going to a different school next year. So really optimistic that, we're going to try again then, and just keep on like having that documentation, seeing how the summer goes, seeing how he transitions into the next school year as well. But also mom's being proactive and has already reached out to that middle school to set up an appointment for like the first week of school.
Awesome.
So I think that's really, really good too. But yeah, no, I think this is a really important video.
It is. It's because I think a lot of people don't know where to start. Like I said at the very beginning, they don't know where to start. They don't really even know what it is, what the difference is, what it could provide for their child.
Misconception of like what you were saying earlier, like, I don't want a crutch for my kid.
Because, and I don't want a crutch for your kid. We want them to be successful on their own, but sometimes, it kind of like exposure therapy. It has to be in stages to get there so that they feel safe and they feel like they're doing it, on a timeline and at a level that they feel confident that they can accomplish these things. Not just like all at once. Because especially if they have the anxiety, or they have ADHD or even ASD. Sorry, there goes Parker. You can see how good she's doing. But so it would just be too much for them, and then they get discouraged and feel like, see, I can't do it. Like, I can never do anything right. And we don't ever want them to feel that way.
No. And I think too, just to kind of wrap this up, I think, for those parents who are worried about this documentation being a label for your kid as well, I do want you to know that this is about access and support, not about labeling. And your child is protected and has equal rights, even though if they have a diagnosis and things of that nature. I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there that, oh, well, if my child has a 504 accommodations plan or an IEP, they're never going to get into college. And that's like the opposite case. And I used to work on it. And like on my campus, I went to the University of West Florida for my undergrad in Pensacola, and they had a student disability resource center that I actually worked at while I was like a full-time student. And I used to actually like do note taking. I was a note taker. So I would go in with the students
for the accommodation.
And I would take notes for the students and then read it with them. Another part of that particular role, and this is at campus level, right? And I was a freshman and I was doing this for like juniors and seniors of college who are about to just graduate. So, I mean, and this was back in the earlier 2000s, like a decade or two ago. So it's been a minute. And so I do want you to know, like, these resources still do exist to this day. And a lot of students, kind of like what Bethany was saying, do come to the university with accommodations already in plan. So,
and I've even had this year, so I have a lot of teenage clients who are always applying to college. I had a couple of my clients write their college admissions essays on whatever diagnosis like they have and how it impacted them and how they've grown and all of that. And they've gotten into full rides and into college. So it's not going to prohibit your kid from going to college.
Right.
Like, by any means.
Yes. I do know that there's still a stigma, but I just wanted to utilize this platform to at least highlight that really quick as well. So yeah, well, thank you guys for joining us and hanging out with us on Air with B&B. Remember that your mental health matters, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Bye.
I'm looking for somebody.